Yes, we are going live. This is Patrick Danko from the Human Design Perspective, and today I have my special guest, William Deck. William, how you doing this evening, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for having me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you being here and carving out time. And I'll have William introduce himself. But, what I wanted to say first and foremost, the Human Design Perspective podcast is where we feature entrepreneurs, where we feature human beings sharing their journey, right? Really sharing their journey, their process, where they've gotten to, the challenges they've overcome. But in that journey, how they found purpose and how now that they found their purpose, they're sharing that with the world. Through acts of service, right? The goal and the objective is always to inspire people through our journey and our stories as well. And today I have William Deck joining us, who is a success and mind coach, founder of Mindbusiness LLC. He helps individuals and organizations remove their own success barriers by providing education on the mental foundations for success. William's going to be talking about his own personal journey, how he got here today. He's also going to talk about the challenges that he's had to overcome to find purpose and alignment. That's imperative. We're not just speaking to it, but we're living it. He's going to share that journey as well. But we're also going to talk about the conscious and subconscious mind, how we're programmed, and oftentimes we're not aware of it. How this impacts us from a limited belief perspective, and some things that we can do, tips that we can all do to overcome these things. So William, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. Once again, I'm really excited to be here because I think these conversations just need to be lifted up more. Fortunately / unfortunately, these things
Yes.
are not talked about enough, right?
Right.
And all of us are living our lives. We are very busy doing all kinds of stuff, but the question is, are we finding purpose in it? And if
Mm,
we're not, we need to understand why, so that we can get to that place of finding value in everyday living. And
yes.
that's kind of the new mantra that I've had. Like, it's very important and
Of,
essential to find value in everyday living.
of course. Of course. And now, before we get into that, because I agree, I think this is imperative that we talk about it. Sometimes it's not talked about enough, kind of like you alluded to. But maybe you can let people know a little bit about who you are, dive into that a little bit, and who you serve, so they get a real nice glimpse of who we're talking to today.
Yeah. So first and foremost, thank you for the introduction. But what I do as the founder of My Business LLC is that I primarily work with organizations to basically create custom mental fitness solutions. And what that really means is with a combination of workshops. So there's an education piece, team building exercises, as well as one-on-one coaching. What we've done here at My Business is create a holistic solution for employers to say, we want to make sure that at the individual level, as well as collectively at the organizational level, through culture shift, through employee engagement, we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be able to see the value in everyday living, which
Mm,
means they have to see the value in themselves. They have to learn how to love themselves. So before you can attach yourself to a mission, vision, and values for an organization, do you have those same things in alignment and in place in your own life, right?
mhm.
What is your personal mission and vision? Why are you here, right? And if you don't know that, then it's going to impact your performance, especially over time. And so, as opposed to saying we're going to take the traditional route of just doing consulting on processes,
Right.
we're more people focused because people make up the organization. So, if we start from the bottom up, starting with the actual team members, then we have
Yes.
an opportunity to create something that first and foremost they're going to be connected to, and then also as they make transformation, see more of what they're capable of doing. That growth and that purpose and that value is going to roll directly to the employers. And so we basically flip the consulting model on its head and think
Yeah.
the processes aren't enough. We got to start with the people.
Yes.
So that's what we do.
No, I love that, right? Because like you said, it's like you're taking the traditional ways of doing things, rearranging it. And that's what I was going to ask you too. Like, is it catered to the individual and then you move to the collective group? Because I know it's usually they focus on the mechanics, like you said, the process. But it
Mhm.
sounds like you think you focus on the one-on-one before branching out to the collective group. Is that the idea?
So we actually do a combination of both, and that's a great question. So the actual trainings are for the entire group. The team
Okay,
building exercises are for the entire group. The one-on-one coaching is where we can do more of a deep dive at individual level to
got
say
you.
what are your individual negative subconscious programming. Now, we do have activities that we go through as a group. So everyone's working on this, but there are certain questions, and there's just sometimes just that one-on-one touch that certain individuals may need for whatever reason to be able to help to drive it home for them. And so
Yeah.
that's why we also offer the one-on-one coaching, because we don't make assumptions that everybody understands automatically, because this is a totally different way of looking at yourself, your life, and what's possible. And for
Yes.
most adults, they have never let their mind even go there. And so, of course, some of these topics and things that we discuss is going to get very personal. That doesn't mean you have to share your personal business, but like it's going to force you to think. And if you don't have answers to questions as adults, we get scared as hell. It's like, oh crap, I have no idea. And then you just freak out. But then once again, that's the whole purpose of having what we do is that we have 6 month to 1 year engagements so that we're having that growth and that learning together. We're seeing the bigger picture, but we're also seeing how that applies to us. Because
Yes.
because once again, if you know how it applies to you and the what and the whys and the hows, then once again, then it actually makes sense and it's actually crystallized and it helps to change behaviors because
Yes.
now you're intrinsically motivated as opposed to saying, well, they just came in here and motivated us and got us excited. We had no tactical tools, no self assessments, no nothing. Well, no, we actually make sure you get all that. But you may still need that one on one coaching because once again, if you're working on something that's been present in people's hearts and minds for 40, 50, 60 years, you might need to do a little bit of deep diving.
Yeah.
So we make that available.
I love that. I do. I really do. And I want to ask you, like, how receptive, clearly, you and I know, from a mindset, even from a spiritual perspective, we understand the importance of this. This comes before everything, the tools.
Mhm.
But I'm curious, just because we say it's been a traditional way of doing things and now you're implementing something new, was there some resistance in some environments? The more unaware people know what they know and they don't know what they don't know. So if they don't understand, like, wow, this is actually going to help me propel and change who I am, and then it's going to impact my performance, right? That's the
Mhm.
return. But do people always make that connection initially?
So I would say it's probably a 3 out of 4 proposition means at least 2/3 of the people I think fairly early, like within that first workshop or two, they got it.
You got
The
it.
other
Okay.
25% are individuals who may be resistant to the ideas because it's not like anyone ever is being called out or this is about you or you need to listen to this. It's really just more about are you as an individual ready to do the work? Are you ready to face yourself and ask those critical questions? Because honestly, some people, which usually is about 1 in 4, I've seen thus far over the past 2 years, they're actually a little scared to actually know what the answers are. I've had certain one-on-one coaching clients even tell me it took them maybe a month to actually get through one of the or some of the exercises and really get down their true thoughts because there was so much resistance that I don't even want to know what's in that subconscious memory bank, right?
Yeah.
Like I've just been dealing with it and I've created behaviors around it for so long. I'm not sure if I'm ready to know and to face myself in that way. And
Right.
so, and once again, kind of referring back, but that's where that one-on-one coaching really is very, very helpful and supportive, and
Yes.
it's made optional, so that it's not like you have to force someone to do it. But what we see is that usually after about 2 to 3 months down the line within the engagement, the other 25% has usually engaged and has grown. And it's been situations to where there's been certain individuals who didn't comment on any of the workshops or team building exercises, more than 3 or 4 times for an entire quarter. And then all of a sudden, something flashes within and they're like, you know what, thank you very much. You get that email or they'll speak up and say, you know what, I've been listening and kind of pondering on this stuff. And I'm really glad we're doing this because of X, Y, and Z. And so
Yes.
everybody comes at a different time, but
Mm.
ultimately, the goal is to get people out of their own way to be able to begin to address some of this pain and ultimately childhood traumas that come in the form of negative ideas and thoughts, and of course, even experiences that have gotten us in this limited thinking perspective, right?
Right.
Because if you don't open up your mind to new opportunities, then those opportunities really don't exist,
Right.
So that's really the goal. Like, open people up and say, man, what's possible?
Right.
And hopefully during the process, I am now believing, or I'm in the process of truly believing in my heart that I'm worthy of this endeavor. Not just that I can do it, but that I'm worthy of the positive outcome. Because
Mm.
that's another big thing is that whole worthiness aspect, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But you
Yes.
have to believe that you deserve better outcomes or a better life or a better mate before you can even open up the spiritual door for it to come in, right?
Yes.
Because outside of that, you're going to block it off and subconsciously saying, I'm not worth it. I don't deserve it. I've done too much. I made mistakes or whatever else it may be. But that's a very common voice that kind of trips people down that route of undeservingness that we have to break up and address too, because that's a big one.
Yes. Well said. Well said. I appreciate that. And before we dive into some more, like you said, we're going to get into some worthiness discussion as well, and some consciousness. We would love to hear your journey. Like oftentimes when we have guests on, um, really speaking to how they found their awakening and found their purpose, right? Like what you're doing is very purposeful, right? And very intentional work. And I think it's transformational, right? Clearly. So it's almost like, okay, well, how did William Deck get here? What was that shift for you? What did it look like? If you don't mind sharing that.
Yeah, I think that that initial, you know, time that I would say, which is I think kind of quantified now, the more popular term is dark night of the soul, right? That means like all hell breaks loose, and then you figure out what you're made of. That actually happened when I was 20, almost 21 years old.
Okay.
It initially started with in 2006, my stepdad, during Thanksgiving break, I actually was home from college. I was a sophomore, and in the middle of the night, he actually ended up having a stroke.
Yeah.
And so from that moment, pulling him out of the bed and trying to sit him up on the side of the bed, hopefully to allow him to be able to breathe a little easier until the paramedics got there. From that flash pan moment, to flash forward, a year later, I had taken a year off of school. I was totally off track on the plans that I'd had,
Right.
as far as graduation. I was living on campus. I moved back home. The credit cards that I had only to build credit were all of a sudden being used to help to put food in the house.
Right.
And my stepdad was actually a majority owner in 3 radio stations
Mhm.
that were spread out across the country. And so I was planning before he got sick to
Right.
come into the business to help him to grow it,
I
right?
got you. Okay.
And so that was also shattered. And so
Uh-huh.
all of a sudden, everything that I put my energy into as far as who I was going to be, or what I had, all those things were challenged. And then scary questions began to pop into my head like, well, okay, if I'm not that or this stuff or who I
Mhm.
know, who knows me, who in the hell am I?
Right.
Prior to that, I had been an athlete for many years and got injured my senior year in high school. So some of the D1 offers, began to dry up.
Right.
Right before they were going to be doing the offer, doing the official offers about 2 months later.
Okay.
So that was something that happened a couple years ago. But because I was able to get into college at a good school and just kind of keep on going, even though it bothered me, it wasn't like going to like change my entire life. Like I knew I still had options, which was cool.
Right.
But so just having to face myself and ask questions that I was unprepared to answer, being in situations to have to be more of a father figure than an older brother because I have 3 younger siblings and all these different things and relationship turmoil, all these things, all this stuff that was happening. I basically felt like I had lost everything
Okay.
and I didn't really have anything left based on my old identity. So I really had to begin to ask some critical questions. Who am I? Where am I right now? Like,
Mm.
where am I within this world, this big world? And what am I going to do next? How do I provide value to the world if it's not this or if it's not that?
Right.
And it was really tough because I wasn't ready to answer those questions, at least in my own mind. But what it forced me to do is to have a spiritual awakening that really began to ignite these new ideas, like you know, um, servant leadership and motivational speaking, inspirational speaking, and ministry, and all these just new ideas that were flashing into my head. And it took me probably 2 to 3 years to kind of begin to figure out what that was. But
Okay.
one thing that was very clear to me during that time was whatever's happening right now, however I feel, I have to make sense of it and I have to understand it so that I can never go through any situation or challenging time in the
Mm.
way I was going through it at that point. Because I realized along the way over that 2 to 3 year period that yes, it was tough and it was hard, but I was making it harder on myself because I had gotten down on myself. I started feeling sorry for myself. I started blaming other people. I had never done that in the past. And all that negative subconscious programming had gotten deep, deep into my heart. And I was deeply frustrated. And I
Right.
realized that there was a problem. And that if anything, that is who I was not. How do I
Okay.
get out of this? And so over the years, I just continued on in the journey of answering those questions. I learned about the science of the mind, different mechanics, just of the psychology of, the human species and
Mm.
how I had unknowingly fallen into those pitfalls. But the big flash pan moment that I'm sure we're going to go into was when I learned about this whole thing, this subconscious mind. As
Yes.
soon as I got a glimpse of what that actually was, I said, "That's it." And I made that and everything surrounding that a study because that was giving me real tangible answers that said, how in the hell did I get here and how am I going to get out? Because until I could answer that question, everything else was just great motivation and information, but it was not going to help to transform my life. I wanted out. I wanted to stop the pain, the frustration, the doubt, and the worries. It
Yes.
it it, it had become a psychological lifestyle, and I
Yes.
and I felt stuck. The subconscious programming piece. was a small crack in the door, and I ran through that mug and kicked it down and said, "Okay, let me learn everything that there is to know here," and that's why I'm here now.
I love that.
In summation, if you will.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And that, I mean, the whole journey was very powerful. And thank you for being vulnerable enough to share that experience too, William. And you said something is like, how did I get here? That piece, that awareness to be like, how did I get here? And how am I going to get out? Like, that's the piece I want to talk to. And I want to tie that back into the conscious and subconscious mind. Because like I titled in this, you know, when we start getting to this phase when we're putting ourselves down, like I can't do this, maybe I should do that, and it's this negative self-talk, and we reinforcing this negative self-talk, and we're building momentum in this negative direction. We build so much momentum that we don't even notice what we're doing at times, right? And that's what I wanted to speak to today. How do we get a glimpse, almost slow down that process, and then how do we start to change the negative self-talk, the limited beliefs, and identify the programming and then start to change it? Like, hey, I have control. Because oftentimes what I'm seeing is people see what's happening in their material plane and they're trying to force things to happen outside of themselves, not realizing that I have to look inwards to change what's happening on the outwards, right? So I wanted you to start there. How did I get here and how did I get out, you know, from a conscious mind, unconscious mind perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's definitely not a short answer, but I'll try to
We'll give
be
it
as
the
short as
Riverside
possible.
Digest version.
Yeah, yeah, right. You know, for me, I think the first step was what you already mentioned, what I said, like awareness,
Mhm.
realizing that there was a problem, that I was thinking in a certain kind of way, and this thinking was cyclical slash habitual. Like it kept on resulting in the same kinds of thoughts or the same thoughts that made me feel the same way, and all of that was primarily negative.
Okay.
Like there was something within the mechanics of this, and seeing the patterns and saying something's not right with this,
Mm.
right? Like the way I'm responding to this is not mature, it's not positive, and it's not making me feel good first and foremost. So having that happen over and over again, and finally saying, okay, well, you know, going out to bars is not helping. You know, eating bad foods is not helping. You know, being with a bunch of women or whatever else, like none of this stuff is helping. It's actually just like making me feel worse.
Right.
So what is that? Like what am I trying to medicate at this point? And
Mm.
once I kind of isolated it to these habitual states of how I feel and how I respond to stuff, and once again how I didn't really have a clear vision for my future, and it was just kind of fearful and doubtful for a thousand different reasons. All I had to do was think about a new potential, and then there will be a negative reason as to why it couldn't happen pop into my head.
Okay.
As a former athlete, I knew the mental mechanics of that was off because I was a running back, so I was always playing against guys much bigger than me.
Of course.
May or may not necessarily been stronger in the weight room, but you know, if at the offensive line, defensive line, whatever else, they're bigger than me. So I knew from a young age I had to have a mentality that I couldn't look at this person as 6'5", 300 pounds. I had to look at this person in front of me as someone who's going to pay the price for trying to tackle me, right? Or for trying to get around my block or whatever else.
Right.
And so I understood how to isolate and to, you know, basically psych yourself out, at least, right?
Yes.
So I realized that I was psyching myself out, but in a negative way. So once I came across this whole idea of the conscious and subconscious mind, what it basically clarified for me is that there is a mechanics to how our mind works that is consistent across the board.
Right.
Once I understand or heard and understood and internalized the idea, which is the law of mind defined, the law of mind, which is
Yes.
what you think you feel you attract, and what you imagine you become. I
Mhm.
was able to break it down and say, okay, we have this thoughts portion,
Mhm.
right? We have this emotions or feeling portion that builds upon our thoughts or is resulted from a certain thought. And
Right.
then it kicks on our imagination, our vision for the present, and most importantly, the future. And if my thoughts were negative, I was going to have negative emotions, and I was going to have a negative image in my mind, negative images of my potential and what could happen, which means whatever I was going to be imagining was not going to be what I really wanted, and it was not going to be helping me to feel empowered to move towards those
Mhm.
positive goals. Because if it makes me feel negative, how can that be the positive outcome?
Right.
If I'm thinking negative and talking negative, how can I have positive outcomes? It
Right.
doesn't matter what people said or did. If I am allowing that to flow through my consciousness, then I'm setting myself up for failure.
Yes.
So understanding how the subconscious mind works simply allowed me to say, okay, I have to address this transformation in three different pieces. What
Okay.
am I thinking? How am I feeling? And most importantly, do I have a clear vision for the future? If so, What is that vision? Is it positive or negative? Is it towards what I really want, or is it just an amalgamation of my fears and doubts? And once
Hmm.
I begin to break it down in each step, I realized that certain things that I was saying was not matching up with how I felt about myself or how I was facing adversity, right? And then from there, I was like, okay, but how that also impacting what I see. So I had to understand and take into account. I need to start doing vision boards. I knew about vision boards, but I need something to help me to focus my mind, right?
Yes.
From
Yes.
the inside out. So then I got the vision boards and I learned about affirmations and all these other practices began to build because I said, I can think about and focus on anything every single day. And too many days I was focusing on not anything positive or not anything that was going to give me any momentum to begin to go to the next day and then focus on that the next day and the next day and build
Right.
some momentum to manifest something or to create
Right.
something new. So
Hmm.
what I had to do was say, how in the hell am I going to focus and slow my mind down? So I began to put these different practices into place so that I could have something for my mind to focus on, words of affirmations that I could tell myself over and over again that begin to override the programming. Because the subconscious is not just thoughts, feelings, and imagination, but it's also all those things happening in habitual manner. What am
Hmm.
I constantly thinking about in a habitual manner, day to
Yes.
day? How am I constantly feeling? What am I constantly imagining or envisioning for my future? And
Right.
sometimes you just have to get in that process because just like when I was learning how to run faster and catch a football or shoot a basketball, I was out there practicing every single day, and over time, the solid stroke on the basketball court was automatic, right?
Yes.
Because I had been practicing that way, and I've been teaching myself to do these things automatically.
Hmm.
And so I realized it was going to be the same thing for this mental transformation. And once I was able to connect those two and get about 9 months to 1 year of consistent practice, I knew that eventually this is something that I was going to have to be teaching others because
Okay.
I've been searching for so many years, and I was like, I finally get it now, and this
Yes.
shit works. It really works. And I began to help other people, and I was actually, part of. I was leading a program in workforce development. I started teaching the interns and implementing it into our education, and it was transforming their minds over that 4 month period they were there working with us. And I was like, wow, like this is legit. And
Yes.
so I just kept on learning, and now I've just made a business out of it and made it a lot more formal. But yeah, it was just trial and error, and it was ultimately just coming down to I had to know the answer. I
Yeah.
have to know the answer. I have to find out. I will not stop until I know everything I need to know about this because this was way too painful,
Did it
right?
send you down the rabbit hole looking for the answers? I mean, clearly you discovered and found the answers, but did you feel like it sent you down the rabbit hole a little bit?
It sent me down the rabbit hole, but what I realized is that rabbit hole was my own higher self
Mm.
because I realized that these answers were coming from within. It was really interesting that I was reading books and I was out and I was, YouTube and everything else. But also, I learned about meditation as well along the way. And
Yes.
in my quiet meditations, I was having these revelations, and then I would like write them down or whatever, or in some form of way, like try to record them. And then I would hear something from some other great speaker and thinker or yogi or something. And they were saying the same thing.
Yes.
I like, I actually didn't learn this in a book. This literally came from the wellspring from within me, and
Hmm.
it's been affirmed through other people and great teachers and the Bible and all kind of. And it was just like this is the same exact principle, almost sometimes in the same exact words. These answers actually came from within.
Mm.
It was like, wait a minute, so I don't have to read books to learn stuff. Like I knew it, but 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 once again, over the years, I found that certain knowledge is universal and you
Yes.
have to tap into your own higher self, right, to be able to access this information. Because when I talk to other people who've had a similar journey, a lot of our revelations are very much the same because they're
Yes.
universal. And so that's why in my teachings now and in the work that I do, I've taken those universal laws, right, and principles that apply to the mind, and I've ingrained them or engrafted them into everything that I do. So it's not about me having the most information because I study the most and I'm 36 years old. It's because I realized that there were principles and laws in place, just like gravity in nature, but it also applies to the mind. And once I
Perfect.
began to uncover those, it was very clear, and it works because it works. No one questions gravity, so why would we, question, the law of reversed effort, which is basically the idea that if we try too hard to try to achieve something or to get something, we ultimately will get the opposite result because that desire of saying, I want, I want, I want is telling at a subconscious level, I don't have.
Right.
And the subconscious mind doesn't take a joke. It takes everything literally. And so if you feel like I don't have it or I can't do it or I'm almost there, but I'm struggling with whatever else that or whatever that voice is saying, ultimately, that's how the subconscious is going to attract things to you, whether you
Yes.
want it or whether you don't want it. So just that all that trial and error, it just showed me what I needed to see. And I realized that I was going to get a whole lot more done being calm and confident than trying to hustle and grind and force. Um,
Yes.
and that's what I've seen consistently. And so I don't have to stress out and achieve my goals and exceed my goals as well. I was like, what a novel idea. I don't have to stress myself to death in order to be able to, get a piece of the American pie, which ultimately is having peace and of course, financial freedom as well. But peace comes first now, not
Yeah.
money.
No, you mentioned a lot there. Whether it's the I am looking internally, because we always look outward,
Hmm.
uh, and there's so many scriptures and things we can talk about that speak to the I am, right? And there's so much conflicting information. So it's a beautiful thing to look into. When you talk about going down that rabbit hole, I've been there as well. But what you said about what you put out there, when we because from a societal perspective, we are constantly taught, especially in demographics or environments where the ecosystem is you got to work hard, especially corporate structures, type A personality. There's a tendency to always push and work hard and work past your limit, and we equal that effort to our success. I need, I chase, I'm hustling. It has to be hard, but it's like based on the laws. That's what we're inviting into our space, into our energy, right? Into our auric field. And it's really about shifting that. And I believe like that's the hard things. I feel like the dominant message is one where it's encouraging you to work hard as opposed to, grace and flow and ease, and what's meant for you will come to you. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there is a place for hustling, grinding in short spans because sometimes you got to put the work in and get things done. That may be a particular project or some
Mm.
some kind of initiative you're trying to uplift or whatever else. But the problem is that most of us have been taught that that's how it should always be.
Right.
And so a lot of times, even if we are, working towards our goals, a lot of times we will tell ourselves that, oh, it's not happening fast enough, or
Hmm.
hey, or at a subconscious level, and this is kind of to build upon that first idea, at the subconscious level, something kind of goes off within us, almost like an alarm that says, hey, we're not working hard enough, we're not doing enough. But if you look at the results and you look at how things are progressing, you can, if you're calm and not getting pulled back into hustle and grind, you'll be able to clearly see everything's happening exactly as it should. I not only am I doing enough, but I am enough.
Ooh,
Relax, you're good.
uh,
But what usually happens is that the voice says you're not working hard enough. This is too easy, or this is not the way it's done. You gotta now have to start a new endeavor before you really get this other one solid and secure financially. Otherwise, you want so now you need to do something else. And it's just like what ends up happening is, and I've kind of identified this. It's kind of like a self rejection complex
mhm. Yeah.
because once again, at the core of it, we are telling ourselves when we continuously, in small ways and sometimes in large ways, punish ourselves, right, by not being able to celebrate our small wins, not thinking that it's enough. The timeline is not happening fast enough, or if we don't do this, someone is going to, take something from us or come up with the idea or whatever. Whatever those words are that get you to push yourself beyond, that point to where the small still voice is saying, okay, that's enough, or take a break. And we choose not to do that. All those are very, very small acts of self neglect. And
Mm.
what it does is teaches through habit, through rhythm, that we don't love ourselves and that we are not worthy of peace and love, right? And just being able to relax and say job well done for the month or for the week. It's always that more thing. And what happens is that over time we just basically convince ourselves that this is the only way that it can be done. I
Mhm.
can only maintain this momentum if I'm working hard to putting in X number of hours. But one thing that got me out of that is that as I began to study success, right, and the principles to success,
Right.
um, I realized that some of the most successful people, and I'm not even talking about Bill Gates and all that. I'm talking about just at any level, at any endeavor, those who are at the top of their field, they usually were the least stressed, in comparison to those that were kind of like in the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
Um, they looked good for their age. They had a healthy practice. Most of them got up early in the morning. And I realized, oh, okay. So most people who are really successful, they're getting up at like 4:30 to 5:30 a.m. every day. They have a workout plan. They have
Mm.
other things, other wellness plans built into their life, but
Yes.
they're also shining in whatever field of endeavor that they're doing. So I want to know what they know, because they're making twice as much as everybody else, but they're smiling and laughing. They have a good relationship with their kids,
And they're
something different, because everybody's just stressed out. But
right.
what do they know? And so that began to break up these ideas for me, is literally seeing other people perform very, very well and do it with grace and ease. I was like, they're not they're not different than me. Like, so what is it? And
Yes.
so once again, it was just life is unfolded step by step. And so answering those questions was another piece of it, because as I've moved on, I've had higher level success in corporate, and now I'm doing full time entrepreneurial, and I have to practice all these things. So now, guess what? I get up at 5 a.m. I go do yoga and other things, and I have a certain
Yeah.
practice. I have a vision boarding time first thing in the morning, read my affirmations, and try to galvanize the feeling of how I want to feel for the day, so that if something happens there that I don't like, it doesn't stress me out or get on my nerves, because I've
Mhm.
already told myself, and I'm training myself to respond with calm and clarity. It's just like all these different things that are now like all the small minutia. It started with realizing that even as I began to build a certain level of success, that I was not at peace, and I was forcing myself to be in a stress state all the time. And I was like, this isn't sustainable. Like, I, I don't do a very good job of hiding my emotions. So if I'm pissed off or worn out, everybody's gonna know it.
No, no.
Something's like, this just isn't gonna work,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
But it took time.
It does take time, and like, I'll be transparent, it's a ongoing journey for me, right? Especially in the entrepreneurial bracket, I'm constant for me anyways. I'm constantly trying to juggle those two. Very aware of it, aware of my energy. But I'm always trying to find that balance between go, 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 and take time to rest. And I understand what it's doing, but it's a battle between my energy and the mindset, right? It's a constant tug of war, so to speak, right? So when I hear you talking about it, it's a beautiful reminder of where I need to be as well, right? And it's for me, it's about putting things in place. I get up early. I don't do yoga, but I'll go for my run, and I have things that I'll do, my meditation, my morning routine before I start. I need to start before I do the work. But because the work is always on the mind, sometimes it lasts longer. My nights last longer than I'd like them to, or they bleed into the weekend and I justify it, or it's difficult to be still and not do anything because I tell myself I should be doing more. This is an opportunity to fill this schedule as opposed to a time to rest, right? So it's really working with that guilt around that. So everything that you said just resonates because I'm still in it, still working through it constantly.
And I am too. But it's just about making progress from day to day, week to week, month to
Yes.
month, and year to year. And so I am doing so much better than I was a year ago,
Yes.
and a lot better than I was doing 2 years ago. And I don't really think that it's about like a thing that you ever get there. It's just a constant reminder
Hmm.
that if I don't show myself that I love me, it's going to impede my ability to be able to see it and feel it from other people. And ultimately, we are here to love and to be loved, right? And if we would add a second component, that we are here to have peace and to explore. And the one thing that I've realized in our Western society, quote unquote, is that for most of us, we've been set up for absolute failure.
What
Why?
do you
Because
mean
we're
by
taught, yeah,
that?
be,
Yeah. Sorry.
because we are taught that the ways in which we can ascribe value is based on, especially for men, but not so a lot for women, how much money we make, who we
Yes.
know, how what our title is within our job, and then there are always these general time frames that are usually too restrictive, and most people don't accomplish them, so they're discouraged, and a lot of people get stuck, once again in that middle bottleneck because they quit or give up or say, it's not for me or I don't deserve it in
Right.
many subconscious ways. And so there's only very few, quote unquote, that get to the top. But it's not about the money. It's not about the title. It's not about any of that. It's about, do you have peace, or can you find joy in everyday living? Because if you can't, I've learned, especially over the past year or two, if you can't find joy in everyday living, then the entire thing is not going to be worth it. Then you failed. Not because you failed and it's bad. I'm talking about that you have fallen short of what the real goal should be, and truly is. If you talk to people when they make a lot of money or make enough money to pay their bills and to travel or do whatever they want to do, whatever it is for them,
Mhm.
they feel pretty good, or some of them do, because it gives them peace of mind that they can be able to take those vacations, do that stuff. If people want to spend more time with their family and they can find a job that allows them to do that, or a career or entrepreneurial work that does that, then they feel better because they're addressing that need of what they really, really want. And so it's just something that it's like, okay, if I am not defined, or if I'm going to allow myself to be defined based
Right.
on these standard ideas that I didn't agree to, that I was just told and everyone else was doing it, so I just did it and believed it. If
Right.
that's actually guiding my life to give me the metrics of success or failure, I'm in trouble. I
Yes.
need to be the one defining what is success and failure for me. Why is that so? And how am I going to go about working towards those goals? So being internally led with the single eye of the spirit, as opposed to being externally led by your outer eyes and ears and what other people are saying, and how, and people agree with me, and they approve of what I'm doing or they don't approve. All that stuff are dream killers, and it's going to take you out of here early. Because if we don't address, if we don't slow down and begin to address what that small still voice on the inside is saying, which is the true self, then we'll never know what what we're doing, right? As far as the purpose. So let's say we will never know why we know. We will never know why we do what we do. We will
Yes.
never be able to derive true value and purpose and have some peace. And we'll always be searching, always be running, always be behind, and will always be not good enough
Yes.
until you say, I'm going to throw out the mold, right? And let that break, and then redefine, put down on paper who I am, which
Yeah.
means I ascribe, or I determine and dictate what my value is.
Hmm.
I decide what's most important to me, and I
Hmm.
have the courage to go after that every single day, no matter what they say.
Yes.
Until you get to that place, then you were externally led, and that means other people's opinions. And if you get fired, and if they don't approve of you, or if you have a bad meeting, then all that is going to impact the way in which you see yourself and your value from day to day for the
Yes.
rest of your life, which
Yes.
means you will never have peace. Nothing will ever be enough if
Hmm.
you don't decide who you are, what your value is, and why you're here on this earth, why, which is to say, why you get out of the bed and put your feet on the ground, and you're not 100% clear on that, then you'll never have a target. You'll never know if you're close to your goals. You never know if you're doing the right things, because you have nowhere to aim.
Right.
And all the while, you're working all these extra hours, doing all the extra stuff, going to these meetings and events and networking with people that you don't like, in an industry that you don't want to be in, and you're just playing a role, and then you die one day.
Ooh.
Is so for me, when I really began to think about these things, I said, that's not a plausible option. I would rather leave, just like, in the Bible, right? The Israelites, they were freed, and then Pharaoh came after them, but before he came after them, Moses was leading them out of Egypt, and they
Right.
received all these gifts from all the Egyptians and all that stuff. And only after a couple of days, most of the nation of Israel was complaining and saying, "Why did you force us to leave Egypt? Was it?" They're basically saying it was better for us to be in bondage than
Right.
to be free and have new options, right?
Right.
Because they were so accustomed to that mental and emotional and physical slavery.
Right.
So that's an example of what most of society is. Most of
Powerful.
society are Israelites complaining in the desert, as
Hmm.
opposed to saying, you know what, the promised land is actually only a 3 days walk. But if we can stop complaining long enough, we can figure out and say, okay, okay, we left for a reason. What the hell was that? Maybe I missed the memo. But right here in the desert now, and we can only live for so long. So let's
Yes.
figure out where we're trying to go so we can get settled, go into the promised land, and receive everything that God told us. Even if I don't believe it yet in my heart, I know the information and I can be going towards it or building the right kind of attitudes. But yet
Yes.
they just complain and complain and complain. And because they complained so much, and kept on doing all this stuff that was basically upsetting God, quote unquote, in the story,
Yes.
which is not the real meaning.
Right.
But because of that, they end up dying in the wilderness. But even the Bible says the people who died in the wilderness was the generation that was born into slavery and had a
Mhm.
slave mindset. They died, but their
Right.
children went into the promised land, which means those who didn't lived under slavery, didn't really understand it, and they were somewhere in between, and their mind was open enough to say, okay, let's learn how to fight so we can go into the promised land. So
Yes.
most of us never learn how to fight and never go to the promised land simply because we're complaining about what we don't have in between. We don't want to face ourselves. We don't want to deal with things that we need to deal with, and be honest with ourselves and say, you know what? I've been living mentally and emotionally like a slave,
Right.
and that's not acceptable. I am
Hmm.
not a slave, and I'm going to prove it to myself, right? So it's just being in bondage and slavery to this system that says most of you guys are never going to be good enough, because if you're black, you're not going to be good enough anyway, right? If you're a
Hmm.
woman, it's going to be really tough for you. If you're this, if you're that, but all those are only ideas.
Yes.
And what we have to understand is that we don't have to live by those dictates.
Yes.
There's there's no written law that says this is the way that it is, but most of us believe it, and we manifest what we believe, even
Hmm.
if it's wrong, even if it's going to kill us 20 years early. It doesn't matter. Whatever
Yeah.
you believe in your heart is what you're going to manifest. And
Mm.
so, to me, that just wasn't an option. So I'm out here as an entrepreneur, yes, because I want to be an entrepreneur, but also because I have to know what's on the other side. I have to know what's in the promised land. I have
Yes.
a vision for what it is, and
Right.
I'm on my way, but I'd rather die in the wilderness than not make it to the promised land. I just made a decision.
Yes.
And that's really it. Like, yes, I have specific goals for the next 3 years and metrics and all that. That has nothing to do with what's in my heart, which is I've decided that this is the hill that I'm going to die on. Either I'm going to get over there, I'm going to the promised land, or I'm not. But I
Yes.
know that I am.
Yeah.
And if you notice, I didn't say I know that I will. I know that I am.
Right.
It's already happened
Right.
because in my imagination, in everything that I speak over myself and my family every single day, it's already done.
Yes.
So now I'm just learning to be patient, to be able to see that unfold step by step and piece by piece, each and every day and year by year. And the crazy thing is that right now we're on path to blow out every other financial metric that we've ever had, working
Oh,
corporate or not. And this is the beginning of year two. And I'm speaking that out for a reason. It's because not only do I believe it, not only are the results beginning to show it, but I don't see it any other way,
right.
because I don't believe that I'm going to die in the wilderness. It's an option,
Oh, I
but
like
what
that.
I've done is taken the option off the table that failure could ever happen.
Good for you.
I have basically decided that failure no longer exists.
Hmm.
It's all opportunities.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm really harping on this is because as an individual, you have to get a deep, bold, fierce courage in order to live this life successfully.
Yes.
Not because you did a lot of stuff and everyone cheered for you, but because you got clear on why you were here, and you got so clear on it that you were willing to die to achieve it.
Ooh.
Which means die to self, die to your old ideas, die to the old self image, not physical death, right?
Right.
But
I
but
understand.
but like let go and shed that old version of yourself, come out of the cocoon and go from a caterpillar to a butterfly, no matter what it costs, because that's why you were sent to this earth. You were
Yes.
sent to this realm for this reason. And once you get clear on it, you can never unknow it.
Yes.
And so then it's the only question that's left is when when am I going to get started? And most importantly, when am I going to get to the place to where I'm going to consistently take action towards this until I get there,
Right.
right? Because at that point that's it. Like, yeah, I can go and do sales and marketing and lead teams. I can do that. But this is my calling. This is not the only thing, but at this step in my life,
Yes.
this is what I know I need to be focused on.
Yeah.
And it won't let me go, and I wake up knowing that every single day. And even when I don't have a great day and don't sell as many stuff as I wanted to sell or whatever else, I still wake up the next morning feeling good because I know that I figured it out and I have another opportunity to do it. And that just
Yes.
fires me up. So,
Love that.
yeah.
Well said. Wow, you went in on that. I hope you have some in the reserves because you talked about bondage, you talked about the Israelites, you talked about Moses, and you talked about being fierce in alignment. And here's the thing, with as we wind down in every podcast, I ask everyone, what does it mean to go from raw to real?
Yeah.
With you, I was asking you from a transformation phase, and you touched on a few things, but I hope you have some in the reserves to speak to that because I want us to really, when I say raw, and I don't mean it to trigger anyone, but I really, when you talked about, I would rather die trying, right?
Mhm.
Like we have purpose, and I'm going to do whatever it takes because I see that, I know that, and I'd rather do that than to live in bondage, and that's what I'm talking about. So I want to ask you, William Deck. What does it mean to you to go from raw to real when we talk about transformation?
Yeah, I think going from raw to real, I think raw from a transformation perspective, because we're talking about mental and emotional transformation. I think what raw represents in that sense is raw potential, meaning that we have this this ability within us, this aptitude that is hidden.
Okay.
It's raw, meaning that we have natural talents and gifts, but there's certain things that will only be activated in times of challenge to force you to go deeper within yourself, force you to have deeper roots within yourself, because the Bible says that people perish because they did not find a root within themselves.
Mm.
So we have to find root within ourselves, and only challenging times or opportune times will force us there.
Okay.
So so we all start with the raw potential. Opportunities and challenges cause our roots to get deeper and deeper within ourselves. And then the real side of it is coming to find out who you really are and why you're here on this earth, meaning that you know your purpose. And once you get close, or once you get clarity on your purpose, then the real you is unveiled, right?
Mm.
Because we are spirit and we have a body, but
Yes.
we've been taught the exact opposite. That
Yes.
we are a body, and there's and God's a spirit, and we're just souls. I don't know something. But I can tell you right now, it never made sense to me. But we are a spark in the one flame. So there's one grand spirit, and we are a spark from that spirit. So we're spirit too. And when we
Yes.
know that, then we get and once again we begin to go beyond the veil of 3D world and making money and trying to fit in. We realize the only way that we can find and ascribe value is to go deeper within ourselves and find some clarity and some peace, and then work towards what allows us to have peace each and every day.
Right.
And that's real. So the reality is, as I said, that we are spirit
Hmm.
and we have a physical body. And the raw side is thinking that you're a body and that you are maybe need to worship a spirit or something else, but you're not spirit. You are this human, and you're stuck here, right? I mean, ultimately, that's how most people feel. Like I'm stuck, and if I
Majority
make
that way.
right, and if I make God upset, then I'm not worthy. Which really, it's actually just you the whole time,
Right.
because you are spirit. So that's how you go from raw to real. Is I think just having that understanding. But the answer that you would have to the question that you have to answer along the way will take you from raw to real, because raw is living in this world and believing everything you see and hear. Real is saying I am in this world, but I'm not of it, and I
Yes.
can go to a different place deep within myself that will give me all the answers, and I can achieve any goal that I want to achieve, and that's real. But
Right.
most people don't know it. And,
Yep.
and that's really a part of my message, right? Like I'm not here like preaching religion or anything like that. I have a Christian background, but I just see people in like what I see every day when I have conversations and stuff on social media. Sometimes I just see so many people in so much pain and bondage.
Hmm.
It's not just that they're not living, their truth. It's that most people are lost. They have no idea what their truth is. And I'm not here to give you the answer and tell you what it is. But there are certain fundamental things that we all see along the way, and I can help you with those. I can tell you those things, but it
Yes.
won't make sense until you see it for yourself and go through it for yourself.
Yes.
But I know that engaging and starting that journey is the quickest way to peace.
Yes.
So sometimes, I'll give an example to try to crystallize this for the group that's listening or will listen in the future. Think of you standing in the middle of like this huge field, right? It's number grass, and you're looking straight ahead, true north, and you see dark storm clouds, lightning, and things like that. Most people would say, well, the best way to try to avoid the storm is to run the other direction, right? Or run to the left or right to try to, get around it. But the truth is, the quickest way through any storm is to run straight towards it. So think about that from a spiritual perspective. Most people are avoiding pain and frustration, which are really just indicators that you need to address this. But
Right.
if you begin to address those things, all the stuff that we've talked about is going to happen automatically in the process, because there'll be certain questions that will come to you, and you realize that only you can answer them. Your mom can't do it, your dad, your counselor. You have to answer your own questions in life to get the best ones. And so you just realize this is really all up to me. Like
Yeah.
this whole thing is up to me, right? So once again, just that's another example to show you that from raw to real is an absolute process. but real is so much, is so worth it. Fighting for that, right? Pushing through your own limitations, healing, showing yourself that you love yourself, right? And any dark area that is within your life, facing it, addressing it, run to the storm. The fastest way through, or the fastest way through, is to go straight at it, right?
Right.
Which means address it. That give you a return on your mental and emotional investment that I can't really explain,
Yes.
because during the process you have to become a different person, or a
Yes.
grander, more holistic version of the former you, in order to be able to hold all of that light.
Yes.
So you have to expand. So becoming the best version of yourself is saying that I start as like a small candle, and eventually I can be the sun,
Right.
right? Which gives you some indicators as to what's talking about in the Bible, right? It's not SON or SUN. It's something in between, right? It
Right.
is, because they're only allegories to try to point you towards who you truly are.
Right.
And yeah, man, it's a wonderful journey, and of course it can be complicated. As long as you say it's going to be complicated, but at the end of the day, it's a self love walk that by the time you look up within 1 month, 1 year, you'll realize that you've healed from so much, and that now all of a sudden you have this new, almost weird capacity to be able to think of more, imaginative ideas,
Yeah.
and so your imagination is fired. You have more
Yes.
energy, more passion. It's easy to overlook the slice of someone else, because something is expanding from the inside. So my capacity is
Yeah.
expanding, and that's just, ultimately it's life, but it is a journey that is well worth it. And I just encourage everyone to begin that process, man, because it's very painful to have to suffer in silence. Um,
Absolutely.
and I did that for a long time because I didn't think that it was okay to not be okay,
Right.
and it's actually okay to not be okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
William Deck, well said. Well said. Taking us on that journey, giving us that education and the insight. Okay, here we go. So, for those that watched and joined us or will see this in the future, we appreciate everyone that tuned in. Thank you to my guest, William Deck, for the information, for sharing your insights, for sharing your journey. And if you want to get in touch with William, all the information will be on the podcast as well, so you can get in touch with him directly. William, thank you for making time today. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Thank you.